I really think that at the top of the agenda they should sort out the bank's crisis. They need to sort out the market economy first because of the impact it has lower down on the social scale, and not just for investment bankers. I think that's what they should have as the first priority, as well as taking into account the social implications of what's going on.
Disparity between rich and poor in the world. 5% of the rich people hanging off with all the money. And I think really any summit of world leaders has to address problems like this. The global economic crisis is going to affect poor people much more than it's going to affect rich people in our part of the world. Bailing out banks is good, but more things have to be done, and that's the things that need to be addressed. Global poverty rather than the problem for rich people in the Western world.
I think on their agenda, I think global unification in terms of policy implementation and how they're going to tackle this whole crisis which is coming to being, that should be their agenda. And I personally would like to ask all these leaders how they plan on communicating the differences that have arisen with this crisis and how they plan on evening those out and working in unity to solve this whole crisis.
I think the main thing they should be discussing is obviously how to get out of where we are, out of the economic crisis, but I think the most important thing is to develop a comprehensive regulatory framework. I think the importance is not to overdo it, not to think that because we're annoyed at bankers or because we're annoyed at the people who got us into the mess, therefore we should change the system totally. I think the system that we've had for the past 20 years has brought a huge amount of economic growth, and yes, it's kind of overshot itself, but we need to think of a clever way to regulate the world of finance and to try and improve it and slimline it, but not try and get rid of it totally.
I think what this financial crisis has shown is that capitalism itself is unsustainable. Endless investment and reinvestment, made up money that's created on computer screens is not a way to run a world economy. The huge social injustice and environmental degradation that capitalism causes cannot be forgotten about in this crisis. We need to think about new ways of organising ourselves, new forms of economic organisation, and have a community-based democratic way of going forward that looks on the small scale rather than the meta levels.
I guess issues would probably be the future, I guess, as someone who's going to be looking for a job in the next few months. I guess job opportunities are quite important for me right now. So I'd like them to discuss, bringing the market and the economy, I guess, back up somehow to speed in some way to increase job opportunities instead of seeing a lot of people losing their jobs.
Well, I'd say to bear in mind that we're all, the disposable income that we all have is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, and in order for people to have a good quality of life and for people to remain confident in a time which really can be quite depressing and people can lose a lot of heart, if we want to get out of this and continue to thrive as our economy to be boosted and for people to continue to live happy and prosperous lives, then you need to take into account the pressures that people are facing. And one of those pressures is, having to cope with economic, crises and difficulty on the family home, and the pressure that has on the family home is faceted. It's not just in terms of how much the bill of your meal comes to. It's it affects a lot of other things such as people's health and happiness and all sorts of other things. So I would say that please bear in mind families and children and future generations when thinking about the cost and pricing of items that we have to incur nowadays.